Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime series where we add value to people's lives, happening every Monday, Wednesday and Fridays on YouTube, iTunes, Google Pods and Spotify, as well as ebusradio.com. For our coaching segment today, we have a very interesting person joining us, and he's Kindness at Work instigator. He's the founder of the Kindness Consultancy and author to the Kindness Code and Living Kindly. Magnus Wood, welcome to the show and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
So Magnus, when I saw, I know we chatted online briefly, and I saw what it is you do, and we sort of had a brief chat about it. And I was so intrigued when I came across this. I was like, what on earth is this about? And I know you explained sort of briefly to me what it is, but please tell us more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Okay. So up until 2019, I had a corporate career. So much like many of the people who'll be watching or listening to the show. So, I had a corporate career and basically ended up running quite a large organization, which had a large holding group who I was reporting to and delivering my numbers and my profits to. I found that their values were very different to mine. And this was a sort of theme that had happened throughout my career a lot. Sometimes I found myself in a place where things I believed, which are essentially about creating great places to work and the role of a leader being really to help people thrive and do their best ever work, just didn't seem to be playing out with these particular people I was reporting to and delivering the numbers to. So I decided then really, to make my own career in terms of creating great workplaces and take everything that I believed in, which is and that had worked for me as a leader, to the fore. And I began a bit sort of working in culture around purpose and things like that. And it was actually lockdown. It was COVID that really crystallized everything for me around kindness. For a number of reasons, one of which is just before in the UK we went into lockdown in March of last year, I had 3 of my clients who I'd been working with in culture and team workshops and that kind of area. 3 clients independently all asked me about how they created kinder working environments. And I'm a great believer if 3 people are all at the same time are asking you something, there's something going on. So essentially, what I did in lockdown when the start last a year ago, 16 months ago, as it were, now, when there wasn't that much economic activity, I used the time really to dig into kindness and look into kindness, because I had intuitively felt and could see that when I was kind to people in a work environment, I got better results. And so that took me to a place of really doing the biggest analysis of kindness at work, specifically really digging into the kind of the science of it, how kindness works at work, looking at all the academic studies, looking at all the management literature. It kind of took me to a place of really understanding that kindness is one of these things that's a force multiplier. Where there's trust, where there's creativity, where there's good teamwork, where there's good well-being, when an organization's thriving, they tend to be kind organizations. So that led me to write a book, The Kindness Code, and it's led me to a place now where I work with organizations of all different kinds and sizes, encouraging them to be more deliberate about creating more kindness at work, because they see the positive business benefits, but they also see the positive benefits for everyone who works there as well.
So, I mean, it's so fascinating, because you kind of go, we take it for granted, I think, that kindness is something that people obviously do. And, you think that, again, we take it for granted that that's not something that we need to be actively involved with and teaching people how to do more effectively. So, I mean, you speak about kindness as redefining how we work. So don't you want to speak to us about that? Because you also mentioned, values and the importance of that, and toxic environments. And I think so many people have experienced that and live with, they kind of almost used to the fact that this is just a toxic environment. That's how we do it here. They don't know how to redefine it. Can you speak to us about this?
Yeah, and it's a very familiar environment, and you're right in what you say about people taking kindness for granted. The other thing that's at play is a lot of people think there is no place for kindness in business because business is dog eat dog and it's tough and all the rest of it. There's a really fundamental insight that drives the power of kindness at work, which a lot of people don't realize, and but it basically boils down to that every business outcome that you want to create comes from the people who work in your organization. So it's everything you want to produce, every kind of, market share point you want to increase on, everything that you want to get to comes from the people in your organization. So therefore, if your people in the organization are thriving, if they're doing their best ever work, if they are, ending their day feeling great about the work they've done and looking forward to coming in the next day to do that again, then you've got a successful, or you've got an organization which is on the road to success if it's not there already. So a lot of people just forget about what they're trying to, achieve, and the people, the role of that. They think about, oh, we need to increase market share, for example. Well, the only way you're going to do that is if the people in your organization are working at their best in order to make that happen. So that's why kindness is so important, because the other thing that's going on, and you sort of touched on this, is that people simply are not prepared to work in toxic environments. Some people put up with it because they feel they have to, but increasingly people, and ask anyone under the age of 40 or 45, they're just not willing to do that anymore, because the contract and the relationship we have with work has changed. It's not a job for life. It's not a job. You're not lucky to have a job. This is an equal contract of people bringing their best talents in an organization which is helping them to flourish. So the thing about kindness is that kindness at its root is about being empathetic to other individuals. It's about, one-on-one or in groups. It's about really being present with people and understanding them, and letting these people see that they have been understood, and also that they've been valued as well. So when you focus on encouraging people to be kind, what they do is they turn more of a spotlight on how they interact with people, and they think more about the consequences of their actions. And to go to the start of where you kind of introduce this, one of the things that I often do in organizations is make them realize that even little acts of kindness have a fundamentally powerful benefit, because they make you feel good, they make other people feel good, they make you work well together. And what we know, and from the science, but what I see on a daily basis, is that kindness is positively contagious within organizations. So organizations that encourage people to be kind are actually encouraging more and more behavior where people are working better together and working well together. And that's why I fundamentally believe that the future of work is kind. It absolutely is, and increasingly people are seeing that as well, which is good news.
So, and little acts of kindness, and I think when you consider that as a statement, like you say, I think in corporate we have the notion that it's not something that belongs, but yet. You're still dealing with people. We're still human, and we still have feelings and emotions and experience. And I think COVID, in a big way, has really started pushing that agenda of, well, if I'm going to be spending 8 to 10 hours a day doing this work thing, where am I going to be doing it? And do I even like being in this environment? Is this a beautiful environment to want to go to? Do I get excited to be here? And I think, as you mentioned here, just listening to what you're saying, corporates, I think, are a little bit under pressure. That we're not doing corporate and work life like we used to anymore. There's a lot more. I mean, you're right now. You're sitting on a houseboat, speaking to me, from the UK, and so there's so many considerations that corporate life needs to start changing. And I think, you also mentioned younger people who are starting to go, well, this is an equal sort of contract that we have. If I can't work with you, I'll go and find somewhere that's sort of conducive and has the same values and does have a kindness approach to how they do what they do.
Absolutely, and that's it. You know, people vote with their feet, and they don't stay, and that's why, you know, kindness is so important to organisations, and why I find that, you know, that it's really forward-thinking organisations of all sizes and shapes who are embrace kindness, because they know, as you said, that the kind of the nature of work has so fundamentally changed that that we don't have to do work we don't want to do, and also work itself has changed. You know, the nature of how we work now, you know, if you've got an office job, you don't have to be in the office anymore. And, you know, the control that a lot of organizations put on people by saying, no, you've got to be at your desk 9 to 5, or, you know, even longer. You know, COVID and the experience of working in lockdown demonstrated that actually people could work just as effectively, if not more effectively. And what I find really interesting is some of the smartest organizations that I'm working with are now opening up their hiring policy to basically saying, you know, if you can log on, you can work with us, and you know, if you can log on in these kind of hours, you know, we sort of don't really care where you work now, where you're situated, as long as you're one of us and you buy into the culture and you're kind and the rest of it. So there's never been a more fertile time for kindness, and kindness is also, you know, you think about the increased interest in the environment that we, you know, driven by the, you know, the urgent need to do work on the environment and sort so many things. But you think about the interest much more in alternative forms of spirituality, and, you know, it's also in kind of, you know, eating well and all of that. Kindness is all part of this kind of greater consciousness that we have, that particularly younger people have, that they expect to bring into work. You know, for as another example, you know, for a lot of people, you know, they want to feel that their organization isn't just about making money, that it's actually, you know, the world and the planet and the communities they're in are actually benefiting as a consequence of that organization being there. And that's the nature of work nowadays.
You mentioned something that's really interesting is, you know, if you can be online, then we can work with you kind of idea, right? And I just recently, one of the biggest insurance companies in South Africa was sharing a talk with them, and they were speaking about, you know, how do we formulate this new idea of working remote, or do we come back to the office, or is it sort of a blended approach? And from the questions that I was hearing from everyone in the, you know, on the actual conversation, do you believe that we actually have organizations that don't fully define their culture and know exactly who they are is really struggling with this? Because you know, when you have a strong culture and you know what that is, you kind of go, dude, I don't care where you're working, as long as we get the work done, and let's have fun while we're doing it kind of approach. Do you know, cultures are work cultures are in question at the moment?
100%, and I think there's quite a lot in there. So one thing that is true is that often you find a management view of what the culture of the organization is, but actually the reality in the meeting rooms, on the emails, on the Zooms, on all the rest of it, you know, there is a different kind of culture that's at play there. And frequently, you know, myself and my colleagues are brought into organizations where management are realizing that, you know, there could be bullying going on, there could be bad behavior going on that they didn't really know. So the important thing about culture is to have a shared sense of what that culture is. You know, what's important to you, you know, what values are important to you, you know, how do you behave, you know, what's acceptable behavior, what's not acceptable behavior. Culture in many ways is like a map. You know, it kind of tells you where you can go, where you shouldn't go, because it's like I was away at the weekend, we got stuck in the bog. You know, it's kind of like, you know, we didn't follow the map properly. So I think it, you know, and nowadays where you have workforces that are, sort of dispersed, or they may be working some of the time at home or whatever, it becomes really important then to have a shared sense of what that culture is. And that's achievable in online, on calls and things like that. But one of the things that I find a lot of organizations are now in the UK, we've got summer holidays at the moment. A lot of organizations are really going to start going back in September. Quite a lot of them are now viewing work as, when we're together. So when the whole team is together, so it could be a marketing team or a product development team or a project management team, they're creating more events out of the fact that when people are physically together, they're creating experiences of being together. And then the rest of the time you're at home working or whatever it is. And that, again, is very much, a sort of, a pattern of work that is emerging. But with organizations, if you don't manage your culture, you end up with a culture gap between what you see and what you think it is and what the reality is. And also, I would say that if you aren't deliberate about kindness within your organization, you end up with a kindness gap between kind of what you think the organization might be kind, but actually it may not be as kind as you think it is.
Yeah, and funny how having a culture gap relates so well to a kindness gap, because I'm just looking at areas that have been some of the themes that we've chatted about in the last year on the show, and that being the effects of remote work and what that's actually doing, and how this is playing out in environments, but also the absolute need for acknowledgement. It's become so significant where some of the stats that I was sharing in the talk was some of the biggest problems that people are experiencing at this moment is feeling completely disconnected and lonely, right? And then you kind of go, well, that's interesting, because what is happening in a team and in an environment now that we're working remotely, that people are so disconnected that it's become a mental illness. It's become part of a problem in their work environment based on the fact that they feel lonely. They don't feel like they are connected. But also another one that's come up is diversity and inclusion. The importance of diversity and inclusion within an organization. But if you listen to all of these symptoms, I would coin them as symptoms, you kind of go, well, where's the root cause? And I'm kind of thinking it might actually just be kindness,
Yeah.
We showcase kindness. We can take time to acknowledge someone and showcase kindness to understand how diverse and different they are. And it all comes back to kindness.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the powerful things about kindness is that if you are being fully present with somebody and really listening and hearing and understanding them and wanting to understand them, and then kind of acting accordingly, which for me is about, that's about kindness. You're valuing that person, even if they have a different skin color, different background, they sound different, they look different. You're saying to yourself and to that person, you're important. What you have to say is important. Your point of view is important. And that's why, that kindness plays so very well into, diversity and inclusivity, because it's really about being kind to the other person, being present and being with that other person. So kindness is very powerful. And one of the things that I've learned in lockdown, having talked to hundreds of people now, is that one of the most powerful things that people have done is the check-in with a colleague. So they might have at the end of a Zoom or a Teams call just said, oh, should we just carry on for 5 minutes and catch up and see how you're doing? Or people have said to me, time and time again, they've had a message or a WhatsApp message from a colleague saying, how are you doing? Or I noticed you didn't have your camera on in the last 2 calls. Are you all right? And that, so that's a kind act. That's how you can be kind and really deal with these symptoms that you talk about.
So one of the things that and I don't know if it's a culture, a South African culture, or but I find that a lot of often, and I'm making a gross generalization about it, but what do you do in a circumstance where you're dealing with a corporate and ego gets in the way of kindness? Because a lot of men will kind of go, well, that's all mushy, and do people do that? I'm like, how do you handle when ego gets in the way of it?
So often when I talk about kindness, one of the reasons I talked about my corporate background is that I've run multi-million revenue companies, large groups of people. I come at kindness with a commercial background and frame it very much within a commercial context. So kindness for me is about smart business as much as it is about being having people working well and feeling good and thriving within your organization, which for me is about smart business. Now, ego often gets in the way, but this kind of you unpick that often in these situations. I have people, egos getting in the way, they're going, kindness is soft, and just ask them about, well, how successful is this route that you're taking at the moment? The approach that you've taken, how's that working out? Oh, your team's all leaving. You've got massive discontentment. Your results aren't as good as they were. How's that working out for you? And often you just have to face into these things of ego. And the other thing and call it out and say, actually, you're just following a pattern of what you've done before. Often ego is a cover for fear. People really don't know what they're doing, or they're stuck for ideas, or they're lost. So the kind of ego comes out as a kind of armor or protection for that. But the other point that I also make is that, sometimes the kindest thing to do is the toughest thing, or seems like a really tough thing to do. I have laid off plenty of people in my time, and generally it has been the best thing for them, and certainly it was the best thing for the organization, because that's why we were taking the action we were taking. I've had people thank me after doing that, but also when I was younger, I've sort of put off laying off people. I've sort of said nice things to people when actually they probably needed some tough words just to kind of get them in the right direction. So ego can get in the way, but actually kindness is not about being soft. Kindness is really about going back to this insight, which is people produce the outcomes you want. So how are you making sure that your people are thriving and doing their best work? And sometimes if you need to be tough or strong with them to get there, so be it, because it'll end up being best for everybody.
So, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think that frame is important. That kindness doesn't mean that you're necessarily holding someone's hand through every little process, but kindness can be, I don't think this is the right fit for you. Kindness can be, maybe we should talk about how you find something that's better for you to do, because this isn't working.
Yeah.
That in itself is helping people move on to something that's better for them.
Absolutely.
And that in itself is also kindness. Yeah, I like that you sort of frame that. So if you can leave us with some practical tips on how we could start sort of activating this in our world, for young leaders in the world today, what would you leave with us?
I would say, so my book, The Kindness Code, talks about keys to the kindness code. I'm just going to pick out 3 of them, I think. The first of which is to acknowledge the power of kindness. So little acts of kindness can have a profound impact and make enormous changes. I've talked to people who have sort of remembered an act of kindness from 30 years ago, and and working with a colleague, and that's fundamentally changed the relationship they have. So acknowledge the power of kindness. I think the other thing is to be kind indiscriminately. So don't feel you're going to ration out kindness or use kindness strategically like a political tool or something like that. The reality is, the kinder that you are in work situations and in all situations in life, what you're actually doing is you're firing off a whole load of serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin in your body, which is making you feel good mentally and physically, and the other person. So by being kind indiscriminately, you're actually doing yourself a massive favor. You're also spreading kindness as well, because that's what happens. And then I think the last thing is, if you receive kindness within your organization, if somebody acts does something kind to you, acknowledge that but then pass on the kindness to somebody else, because what you're effectively doing is you're empowering that kindness that was there already. So, if kindness is, you've been in a meeting and somebody says something great to them, well, go and say something great to somebody else. I think the last thought is there's a really simple definition of kindness, which is, and what I hope I've done on this your show here, which is kindness is about leaving everything and everyone better than when you found them. And so if you go into a meeting, for example, and you walk out of there and everyone's walked away better than when they started, that was an act of kindness. And again, that's what I hope I've done in our conversation today.
I completely, you have left me kinder than I was 5 minutes, half an hour ago.
Yes.
I just want to touch on one point that I think is significant. As a coach, as someone who works in leadership and training the whole time, a theme that really I always come across with is being kinder to yourself and how people don't do that.
Yeah.
You just want to just touch on that as well, because I think, as a rule, we tend to dismiss our own abilities. We dismiss our own achievements. We dismiss that, what I practice here, I don't often practice there.
Yeah.
We miss the whole kindness for ourselves. And why, from your perspective, is this so important?
It's the second key to the kindness code, because it is so important, because if you want to be an example of kindness to other people, then you have to be it yourself. But I'll give you a very simple example today, which is an act of kindness I did on myself. So I came back from holiday this morning. I drove back. Instead of getting in the car, I went for a walk in the countryside where my house is, and I saw 2 deer this morning. I've already won today. I said to myself, right, if nothing else happens, I've gone out on a walk first thing in the morning, 7 in the morning, I saw 2 deer, I've won. And so that's an example of me being kind to myself, which is I'm going out, I'm resting, I'm kind of like recharging, but I'm also actually being smart, because it means that the rest of the day is going to be super positive, because I already think I've won today. So that's one of the reasons why being kind to yourself is so important, because you've got to keep recharging your batteries, as it were, but also it gets you into that mindset where you can thrive no matter what kind of thrown at you.
And I mean, that's to my last question for today is, how do you keep yourself upbeat and motivated? And exactly to this point that be kind to yourself. It lends itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, getting out in nature, I'm a big foodie, foraging, cooking stuff, things like that. Find your thing, find the thing that is easy to do, that you can do straight away or this afternoon or whenever it is, and just do it, even if it's only for 20 minutes or so, because it's just so valuable. Yeah,
absolutely. So, Magnus, I mean, this is a fascinating conversation, and I think such a necessary one, especially in the world that we live in today. I think, just watching the news, I try and avoid it because it depletes me so quickly. But if we had to get a hold of you and find out where, how to have more of this conversation with you, where do we go? What's the website?
So you can magnuswood.com, that's MAGNUS wood.com, and I'm at Magnus Wood on all social platforms. I'm blessed with a name that not many other people have, so I'm very easy to find, and if you see somebody talking about kindness who's called Magnus Wood, that'll be me.
And lastly, the Kindness Code and Living Kindly, where can we find this book?
On Amazon, iBooks, and all good online booksellers.
Fantastic. Magnuswood.com. There we go, guys. And go and check it out on Amazon as well. All this information will be in the description boxes below. So check it out. Magnus, thank you for today's conversation. And please come back and have more. It was a fascinating conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It was a real pleasure.